Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar about food safety in older adults and disease prevention strategies that you can apply and what kind of educational resources are available to you. My name is Magda Heegman-Apel, and I'm the Vice President for Education Training at Meals on Wheels America. We're offering this webinar as part of a collaborative agreement that we have with the Administration for Community Living, as it's hosted by the National Research Center on Nutrition and Aging, which is a resource that we have with lots of different tools and recorded webinars and everything you can ever want to know about nutrition and aging. I wanted to give you a couple of housekeeping notes. You can interact with us and engage with us. We want you to during the webinar. If you have any questions or comments for the presenter, what you need to do is click on the Q&A function on your control panel. That's should be on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're not seeing it, just enlarge your control panel and click on the white arrow in that little orange block to open it up. You'll see Q&A, and we encourage you to communicate with us. Uche Akabundo, my colleague, will be monitoring your questions, your comments, and will share those with Adam, our presenter. We'll also have a couple of polling questions for you. They'll pop up on your screen, and we ask that you click on the answer that's most suitable for you, and then we'll read you the results of the polling questions. So with that, I would like to introduce Adam Gehring, who's a public affairs specialist with the USDA, the U.S. Department on Agriculture, Food Safety and Inspection Services. And I think I said that wrong. He's with the Food Safety and Inspection Services of the USDA. He began his career at the FSIS as a consumer safety inspector. He inspected meat and poultry establishments to verify that the commercial meat supply was safe and wholesome, and we're mostly benefiting from his inspections there in the past. In his current role, he educates consumers on safe food handling steps to prevent foodborne illnesses at home and for your clients. With that, Adam, I'd like to pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Magda, for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here to talk to you all about food safety and how we can prevent foodborne illness throughout the country, and including with the older adults population out there. So I'm really glad that Magda gave that great introduction for me, and we're also going to jump quickly into, I guess it's not going to necessarily be a poll, it's going to be more of a chat response. If you all will kind of just enter what your position is within your respective organization, whether that's a director, an R&D, something along those lines. It was just kind of interesting to see what everybody is in this particular webinar. So I'll give you all a second to do that right now.
Yeah, Adam, and people are starting to respond. So Uche can maybe read a couple of them.
Click on that.
Uche, are you seeing the responses?
Yes, thank you so much, Magda. I'll read a couple of them out to everybody. It seems like we have quite a range of individuals on the webinar today, ranging from nutrition and wellness directors. We have registered dietitians represented as well, operations directors, nutrition service managers, individuals from our state units on aging as well. We also have with us cooks in our attendance today, nutrition program directors for the home delivered side of the operations, as well as representation from our aging and disability resource centers. So it seems like there's quite a range of individuals from all aspects of the aging network at the area agency level, the state unit level, as well as direct senior nutrition program staff members.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a diverse group. It's great to hear that you all have a diverse background that you're bringing to this webinar today. So today we'll go over quickly the outline of what I'm here to tell you all about. So I will touch a little bit on foodborne illness in the United States, just what the estimated illness rates are, and then focus on why older adults are at a higher risk for foodborne illness. And then we'll go on to common foodborne pathogens. We're going to focus mostly on bacterial pathogens at this point. And then we'll focus on our 4 steps of food safety. Those are clean, separate, cook, and chill. So hopefully most of you have heard of those steps in some capacity before, but I'll give you a quick little overview of those 4 steps. And since it is October, Thanksgiving is right around the corner, I'm going to focus a little bit on the Thanksgiving and turkey preparation. And then finally, we will finish up with the consumer food safety resources that we have at the USDA that are mostly, well, I guess they all are free for you to use either for yourself, to distribute to others, or to use in any capacity that you see fit. So, all right, next slide, please. So as Magda explained, I am within the United States Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service. So we mainly do the inspection of meat, poultry, broken egg products, and catfish, interestingly enough. For the moment, catfish. That hopefully will not change with the new administration, but we do those inspections. And then I am in the Office of Public Affairs and Consumer Education, the Food Safety Education staff. So we're a smaller staff, and we're working to influence Americans throughout the country. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this slide goes over a little bit of the foodborne illness statistics regarding the United States. So these statistics were developed from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So it's estimated that 1 in 6 Americans get sick from foodborne illness each year. So that's actually quite a bit of individuals. Some individuals don't think they get foodborne illness, but it's actually estimated that quite a few people do. So that includes 128,000 hospitalizations and almost 3,000 deaths. Overall, that is estimated to be $15.6 billion for the U.S. economy, and there are some actual estimations that are quite higher than that, up to $50 billion. So it is something that is important for the U.S. population, and especially older adults, which we will shortly get into why that's a little bit more important for older adults. And within those illnesses, there's a lot of the main players that you usually hear of: E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella. And one that is a main player that's actually found to be not as known throughout the general public is Campylobacter. All right. So let's move on to the next slide. And before we get on to this next slide, we'll go into another poll. So do you do food safety education or training within your organization? So now that we know that foodborne illness is out there, it's unfortunately relatively prevalent. We'll see what sort of education is being done. Yeah, so far it looks like basically everyone. So that's great news, especially with your particular clientele being older adults, home delivered meals, those sort of items. All right. So let's jump a little bit into food safety and older adults. So adults 65 years and older are at an increased risk of hospitalization and death from foodborne illness. So there's been certain studies that have found that older adults, and these are older adults residing in nursing homes, are 10 times more likely to die from bacterial gastroenteritis than the general population. So that's quite a bit. And there's certain reasons that this is the case. And we'll go over each of these a little bit more in detail. But there are some medications that may produce side effects that weaken your immune system. Simply, we age, and there are changes in the functioning of our organs, such as our liver and kidneys are the big ones in the foodborne illness realm. There could be underlying conditions such as diabetes or kidney disease, and there's actually a few others that we'll hit on that are interesting to note. And then also just another age-related tract to your gastrointestinal tract is that bacteria usually stays longer in your digestive system as you age, and there are certain reasons that can cause illness. All right. And we we are ready to move on to the next slide. So those changes in the gastrointestinal tract. So as I mentioned, the GI tract will hold on to food for longer periods of time. So that longer period of time that food is allowed to be in your gastrointestinal tract will allow for more bacterial growth. So also, as I mentioned, the liver and kidneys, they may be affected in a way either through other diseases or they just may change in general that do not rid our bodies of foreign bacteria and toxins as well as they used to in our younger age. And finally, our stomach may produce less acid. So if there's less acid in our stomach, we can have more bacterial growth. So those three factors can kind of all influence us so that when we grow older, we are more susceptible to those foodborne illness, those sort of risks. Alrighty, next slide, please. So moving on to medication side effects. So just most medications that will be in this class are your immunosuppressants. So they basically will weaken your immune system. And then also there are certain medications that will have changes in our sense of taste or smell. So this is important because it may be more difficult to smell food that's gone, that's spoiled, which is important because if you can't smell it, you may eat it. But there is also a note that there are some sorts of bacteria, especially those pathogenic bacteria that may cause illness that may or may not have organoleptic senses to them. So you might not be able to smell those pathogenic bacteria if they're growing, but there are other ones that you will be able to. So regardless, that sense of smell might be affected by medication side effects. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so underlying other chronic conditions such as diabetes, cancer, transplant recipients, and autoimmune diseases. And we will get to some interesting information and publications about all of these other at-risk groups, as some of you may interact directly with these individuals above and beyond the older adult demographic. So for diabetes, these demographics have immune systems that are more susceptible to foodborne illness and just infectious disease in general. So a diabetic patient's immune system may not immediately recognize harmful foodborne pathogens. Alrighty. Also, high glucose levels suppress the function of white blood cells that fight off infection, increasing risk of contracting a foodborne illness. If someone with diabetes contracts a foodborne illness, their blood glucose levels may be affected because the illness impacts what and how much the person can eat. Also, obviously, with diabetes, kidney function is of concern, and then if the kidneys are not functioning, as we mentioned, the body may be more susceptible as well. Alrighty, moving on to cancer. Cancer treatments such as radiation, chemotherapy will weaken the body's immune system, affecting the blood cells that protect against disease and bacterial infection. Finally, transplant recipients and autoimmune diseases kind of lumped together. Basically, with all of those, there's a lot of immunosuppressants that are given with those particular conditions. So obviously, if your immune system is weakened to begin with, that also opens up the door for more infections, unfortunately, through foodborne resources. And autoimmune diseases such as multiple sclerosis, inflammatory bowel disease, and also lupus. All right. And at this point, does anybody have any questions?
So far, so good.
All right. All right, and we'll move on to the next slide. So we'll go a little bit into the, as I mentioned, focusing mainly on the bacterial pathogens that are common sources of foodborne illness. So the first one that I mentioned, Campylobacter. So Campylobacter, there was actually an interesting study by the FDA in 2016 that asked how knowledgeable individuals were of different foodborne pathogens and bacteria. And Campylobacter was one of the lower knowledge ones, but it's one that actually causes quite a bit of illness. So it's actually estimated to cause 1.3 million illnesses each year, or affects 1.3 million people per year, and an estimated 67 fatal cases each year. So incubation period, 2 to 4 days. Your typical foodborne illness symptoms, so cramps, abdominal fever, abdominal pain, fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Most people will recover within 5 to 8 days. There are certain complications. 1 in 1,000 individuals diagnosed with Campylobacter will develop Guillain-Barré syndrome. So this is a paralysis that lasts several weeks and usually requires intensive medical care. So with all these bacteria that we'll kind of go over, those individuals with poor immune systems, such as children, older adults, are more susceptible. So sources of Campylobacter can include contaminated poultry, contaminated water, unpasteurized milk and cheeses, contact with infected animals, including kittens and puppies. I don't know why they didn't say cats and dogs. I don't know why they had to say kittens and puppies, but those sorts of, your even domesticated animals, and unfortunately fresh produce. Alrighty, next slide, please. Okay. E. coli, we call E. coli our king of bacteria, our king of our bacterial pathogens. It's actually not a huge producer of total illnesses, but it is a particularly dangerous one. So incubation period, 1 to 10 days. It's usually about a week after you eat your source, whatever that source of infection was, that you do see illness. Those symptoms, when you do get the illness, include severe diarrhea that is often bloody, severe abdominal pain, and vomiting. Usually little or no fever is present. Symptoms will last about 5 to 10 days, and most people will recover within 6 to 8 days. Unfortunately, there are certain individuals that do not recover as quickly, and those include older adults and children as well. So with E. coli, the main risk is hemolytic uremic syndrome. So normally 6% of the people with E. coli 0157H7 contract HUS. But it's even higher in younger children. 15% will get that after getting E. coli. So that's just, I'm sure you all have heard of the Jack in the Box case in the early 90s. That was one of the big ones that kind of pumped that knowledge to the surface. So that's why E. coli gets a lot of the public awareness out there. So sources of E. coli, a lot of the common that you'll hear, contaminated foods, especially undercooked beef. Basically all of these are unpasteurized raw milk, raw vegetables, and vegetables such as sprouts. And we'll go a little bit into detail. Yes, these can be sources, but there are ways to prevent the illness.
We just had a question
Sure.
from a member of the audience who's interested in understanding what contaminated meat, poultry, beef would be.
Yes.
As a risk factor?
Yes, so those are basically ones that either in the production facility, they have been contaminated in some way. So usually it's some sort of fecal contamination, or a lot of times, especially with norovirus, it's contamination through hand-to-hand contact. Usually someone is just not washing their hands, so that's unfortunately the case that can occur. And then another one is just temperature abuse is the term that we call it, but it's basically where food is in a certain temperature range where you're going to have a lot of bacterial growth during that time. So what little natural bacteria there is that when it is at a lower level that would not cause illness is in that temperature range where it's allowed to grow and to cause illness. So yeah, and once again, E. coli, you can find it in contaminated water. Same idea. You have ultimately fecal contamination usually is the source. So untreated water. There's been actually some, I believe it was the cantaloupe outbreaks, but I believe those were salmonella. What was found was it was out in California, and there were deer running through the fields, and then they were doing their droppings on the cantaloupe in the fields, and that was the source. It wasn't necessarily into the water or anything naturally occurring in the, not naturally occurring, but occurring in the processing facility. It was the deer running through the fields. So, all right. Yep, no problem. And we'll move on to the next slide, please. Alrighty, salmonella. So this is a very common one that people have heard of at least. So it's a relatively fast incubation period, so 12 to 72 hours compared to the almost a week that you'll see in E. coli. So your symptoms, once again, you're similar to most of your fevers, so nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, fever, chills, It can last 4 to 7 days. And the interesting note is for some individuals, including those at high risk, your bowels may take several months to return to normal. So that's one reason to definitely to prevent foodborne illness when possible. And it's estimated that 400 people will die annually from acute salmonellosis. Alrighty. So the sources of salmonella, they live in the intestinal tract of humans and other animals. However, they're usually transmitted by humans eating food contaminated with animal feces, whether that's chicken, that sort of whatever source it may be. Alrighty. And once again, they may look and appear to be just like other safe products, but we just can't see them, can't smell them usually when they're in that small amount. And also, as I'm sure you guys have heard, reptiles, especially turtles, lizards, snakes, they can harbor bacteria, the salmonella bacteria, and also backyard poultry flocks. A lot of people that's getting popular, backyard poultry flocks, not handling them, or excuse me, handling them and not washing your hands as well can be a source of bacteria as well, salmonella in particular. Alrighty, next slide, please. Alrighty, finally, we will get to Listeria monocytogenes. So the disease or the illness is actually called listeriosis. It is an infection that can cause problems with pregnancy and even death in severe cases. And it may take up to 2 weeks to experience symptoms. So this is actually, and it can take even months longer than that. So 3 to 70 days. So symptoms, fever, muscle aches, sometimes preceded by diarrhea. So, and then the major issue, as we had mentioned, is that those with weakened immune systems, such as the older adults, can develop more serious illnesses. And these sorts of foods that may contain listeria are a little bit different than the other ones that we spoke of so far. So they're usually deli meats, smoked seafood, once again unpasteurized milk, and then store-made salads such as tuna, chicken, or seafood salad, and then soft cheeses such as queso blanco, and then also raw sprouts. So basically, we'll get a little bit more about raw sprouts because we get a lot of questions. Well, I eat raw sprouts all the time. Are you telling me now that's not safe? Well, not necessarily. There are certain precautions that we need to take first. Alrighty. And does anybody have any more questions at the moment right now?
No questions?
No questions?
No questions.
Awesome. Alrighty. So we'll move on to foods to avoid. So these foods to avoid are geared more towards those at-risk individuals, including older adults. So this doesn't necessarily mean that the general population, healthy adult, will need to avoid these foods. It's not a bad idea, but you don't need to. And then with all these foods, there are other recommendations that we have for you. So let's get rolling on these. So raw and undercooked meat, poultry, eggs, and seafood. It's always best to safely cook these to a safe internal temperature as measured by a food thermometer. And usually for eggs, especially if you're doing a scrambled or something along those lines, we recommend basically cooking till firm. So no, unfortunately, no over easy eggs and no those sort of eggs. Always cook till firm, especially when you're cooking for others that may be at high risk, including those older adults. Raw or unpasteurized milk. Only consume milk labeled pasteurized. There's a larger, I guess, kick movement, if you want to call it, that is occurring where raw milk is unfortunately starting to come back into the public forefront, but it is very high risk of consuming that. Alrighty, hot dogs, deli meat, and lunch meat. So this is basically saying that, yes, you can eat these, but if you are at a higher risk, you want to go ahead and reheat these till steaming hot, or depending on the product, till 165 degrees. So for a lot of deli meats, lunch meat, and hot dogs, they have a risk of listeria with them, especially those ones that are sliced in the store. There's been some studies and some research showing where that's at a higher risk than the deli meats that you buy in the prepackaged vacuum packed containers, just because there's a little bit more oversight within those federally USDA inspected facilities that are slicing them compared to the grocery store. Alrighty. Unwashed fresh fruits and vegetables. So we always recommend washing your fruits and vegetables with cold running water, even if you plan to peel or slice them. So there's once again going back to those cantaloupe outbreaks, there was the individuals, some of them they found that they had washed them, or excuse me, they hadn't washed them, they'd still peeled them, but they'd still had cross-contamination at that point. So always want to wash your raw fruits and vegetables, even if you're going to peel them. Alrighty, soft cheeses made from unpasteurized milk. The same idea with unpasteurized milk, just turns into a different product. And then unpasteurized refrigerated pâtés or meat spreads. So we always recommend going for the canned or shelf-stable pâtés or meat spreads. And then if you are making your own chicken liver pâté at home, or you're doing something along those lines for a special occasion, always use a food thermometer to make sure you've cooked those to, especially chicken livers, to 165 degrees, not just going at the color of the livers. And finally, the raw sprouts, we always say to enjoy those cooked as well, so never avoid eating them raw. They can have sorts of different bacteria that can basically latch onto them in certain ways, especially with onions, just the way that, if you think of onion, the way it's built, it's got a lot of layers, so a lot of those layers they can be difficult to wash off, so always go ahead and cook those. Alrighty.
Before you move forward, there's a question from the audience.
Sure.
One participant is interested in finding out what you were talking a couple of slides before about the incubation rates, and they wanted to know whether there were any illnesses that manifested almost immediately within an hour or two of ingesting the infected or suspect food item. There
are. I do believe there are some types of viruses that can occur relatively quick. I want to say norovirus, but I'd have to check on that one. There are some, and that's the difficult thing about the rates of foodborne illnesses. They are estimates because it's difficult to know exactly what food caused that illness. And then if you think about, I can't even remember what I had my complete breakfast for this morning, so it's difficult to nail down exactly what foods you might have eaten that caused illness. So it's difficult to know, but there are some, I believe, norovirus is the one, but I have to verify that. Okay. Yep. Alrighty, so the 4 steps of food safety: clean, separate, cook, and chill. So these steps are our consumer-based messaging for foodborne illness. So I'm sure a lot of you, especially the cooks, the dietitians out there, you most likely are aware of the Serve Safe and those sort of items. These recommendations our 4 steps are a little bit more conservative. They're a little bit easier for individuals to remember. For example, our temperature danger zone, we say 140 to 40 degrees instead of the Serve Safe. I believe it's 135 to 41. So it's just a little bit easier for individuals to remember. All right, next slide, please. So we'll jump right into these steps, and the photo on the left there is actually from one of our infographics from our Thanksgiving. We've called it the Let's Talk Turkey infographic. So each one of these steps has an image from that infographic. And it's pretty similar, pretty simple, the steps that we have. So always wash your hands for 20 seconds with soap and warm water. Anytime you're handling foods, after you handle raw foods, and then obviously after you play with pets, going to the bathroom, that sort of thing. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of information out there about hand washing, just very detailed studies about hand washing and where people miss when they wash their hands. So there's a lot of information that shows that people miss the palms of their hands, the middle of the palm of your hand, underneath your fingertips, and in between your fingers. So we have I'm sure if you've ever used the, I believe it's called the glow germ powder, but it's an interesting experience that you use with, it's UV gel, and you use it on your hands and use a black light. It's amazing how much you'll actually miss when you put that on. So always focus 20 seconds. So that's 20 seconds where you're actually scrubbing your hands, not 20 seconds total of putting soap on your hands, washing the water, rinsing them off. It's 20 seconds of actual scrubbing. So also on the clean note, we always recommend making sure you have clean utensils whenever, if let's say you're grilling or something on that line, to make sure you're putting those cooked foods on a clean plate. And then also, interesting enough, one of the things that we promote is making your own household sanitizer. So you can make your own sanitizer by making a solution of 1 tablespoon unscented bleach with 1 gallon of water. And that'll actually go bad after each use. Won't go bad per se, but it'll lose its potency. So you want to use that for 1 use and then dispose of it as well. Alrighty. And then we will get into this we were talking about it before the presentation kicked off. This recommendation we have that actually says do not wash your raw turkey and or raw meat or excuse me, your raw chicken. So I'll go over the next slide. We'll go over a little bit more. But in that same FDA survey, it was found that quite a few, actually 60-some% of individuals responded that they do wash their raw poultry. So we do not recommend that. And I'll explain, I believe, in the next step. Yep. Alrighty. So once again, this is a dramatization. So it's not nearly this bad, depending on how much force you use. But basically what can happen is when you have that raw meat in that sink and then you have any running water going on it, you're not going to remove all the bacteria that is attached to that raw meat just the way some of it attaches. It's very tightly bound to that particular piece of meat. You will remove some of it, and then if there's any water splashing, it doesn't need to be a ton of water. It can be almost air droplets. That can spread bacteria. So I believe if you just click, yep, there we go. So it's just a little showing of what that potentially could look like. So if you are washing that raw meat in your sink there, you could potentially have other items, other surfaces in your kitchen that you are getting contaminated as well. You might have paper towels. You might have some raw fruits and vegetables sitting there as well that could get contaminated. And also, actually, while I'm here and talking about kitchen towels, another thing that kind of people are, it's a moment is we actually recommend using your kitchen towels once, your cloth kitchen towels once, and then disposing them. There's actually an interesting study by Kansas State University that mentioned that the kitchen towel is a great spot for bacteria to hide just because you might have a little bit on your hands after you're washing your hands, and then you rub it on that kitchen towel and it stays there and it's nice and moist and it's a perfect medium for bacterial growth. So we recommend using your kitchen towels once and washing them, and then if you're using paper towels, use those once and dispose of those as well. Alrighty, next slide, please. Alrighty, the separate step. This one, once again, it's pretty easy. The goal is to prevent cross-contamination of raw meat. So any raw meat juices can have the bacteria that we mentioned. So prevent that cross-contamination of foods, hands, or equipment. So keep raw meat away from ready-to-eat foods. And one of the ways that we recommend to do that is to use separate cutting boards and utensils for your raw meats and poultry, and use a different cutting board for your fruits, vegetables, and cooked foods. So that's an easy one. And then also using one of the plastic bags that they have in the grocery stores for your raw meat. So when you put your raw meats in your grocery cart, first put those in those plastic bags and put them at the bottom of your grocery cart. Alrighty, next slide. Alrighty, the cook step, the fun step I like to call it. So once again, as I mentioned, it's difficult or it is impossible to tell if a meat or a poultry item is fully cooked just by looking at the color. There's once again, I believe it was Kansas State University as well, did an interesting study where they had different types of hamburgers, and they showed that they cooked some to brown in the middle, but it's actually cooked to 145 degrees, which is potential for bacteria to still be present. They had others that they cooked to 165 degrees, and they were red in the middle. So just depending on the type of, if there's any seasoning in it, the type of packaging that's ground beef it is in, color alone is not an indicator of doneness. So we always recommend using a food thermometer when you're cooking your meat, poultry, and other food products. So the all poultry is 165. That's ground or otherwise. Ground meat's 160, so it's all ground red meats. And then whole cuts of red meat are 145 degrees. And going along with the turkey, just because it is such a large cut of meat, if you are cooking a turkey this year, we recommend checking it in 3 places. So the thickest part of the breast, innermost part of the wing, and the innermost part of the thigh. And then that should all be 165. Alrighty, next slide, please.
Question, Adam,
Yes.
before we move on to the chill step, we have a question about the hand washing process. We know that it should be 20 seconds of scrubbing, but how long would you recommend that the entire hand washing process takes then?
Usually what it amounts to is about 30 to 40 seconds. So interesting enough, we still say using warm water when possible. But however, the CDC has kind of said that cold water will be sufficient to use. So basically what they say is to wet your hands a little bit beforehand, before you put the soap on, and then put the soap, so that 20 seconds is actually scrubbing of your hands, and then the rinsing of your hands, rinsing thoroughly, and then drying. So about that whole process should be about 30 to 40 seconds or so.
Okay. Along with those same lines, the question from the participants. One is on looking at the bleach mixture. So I go to the grocery store, I buy the bleach that's sitting there, and I make this. Is that sufficiently potent enough? The question is really wondering about using that concentrated bleach solution on the market. Does that work?
Oh, the ones on the market? Yeah, we buy straight from the store. Yes, they should be.
Special and no other sort of bleach?
Yeah. Those will work as well. And if you do want to just, usually that, let's say there was another product, another cleaning solution. So that 1 tablespoon of unscented bleach to 1 gallon of water is basically in lieu of those cleaning solutions. So it would be the same as using straight bleach. So if you had a cleaning solution. So.
Great. Thanks.
Alrighty, and we are on to the chill step. So I've got a couple slides on chill, just because in your home delivered meals, you do have a lot of, this is the biggest step that you will kind of focus on for those. So basically, as I mentioned, the temperature danger zone is 140 degrees to 40 degrees for us. So that's the easy one for consumers to remember. And we never want to have those foods in that danger zone for more than 2 hours. And that's not necessarily that is a total cumulative 2 hours. So if we leave it out for an hour and a half now, and then we leave it out for half an hour tonight, that's a total of 2 hours there. We can't leave it out an hour and a half tonight and an hour and a half tomorrow morning. That will have too much bacteria growth for us. Alrighty. And we'll get a little bit more into storage times for leftovers, but they are, for the vast majority of them, 3 to 4 days. And then we also recommend reheating leftovers to 165 degrees. And when possible, measuring that with a food thermometer. Soups boiling hot, and then when you do reheat foods in the microwave, make sure you rotate them and then stir them to get rid of cold spots. Alrighty, next slide, please. Alrighty, so this is more for if you have a larger piece of food. In this case, a turkey, Thanksgiving turkey, we always recommend to cut those up as soon as possible. So yes, definitely don't rush your Thanksgiving meal this year, but as soon as possible, go ahead and cut that larger meat item into smaller portions. So basically the goal is to have the most surface area as possible. So you should cut those leftovers into small pieces and then store in small, shallow containers. So think of getting them in cookie trays and not Pringles cans. That's the one way to think of it. The small, shallow containers, lots of surface area, they will cool quicker. And then also, we get a lot of calls on our meat and poultry hotline about this one. Do I need to wait till the food is to room temperature before I cool it? So there's no need to wait until it's to room temperature. You can go ahead and put it, you don't want to put scalding hot food in your refrigerator, but it's okay to put food that's a little bit above room temperature. Definitely within that 2 hour time frame you want to get in your refrigerator. So, all right, and then, all right, yeah, I'll move on to the next slide. So moving on to storage times for different types of foods. Quick note about this particular slide. On the left there, we'll get into them more, but this is actually one of our magnets that we do have available for order. We unfortunately are out of it at the moment. We should have some more printed shortly, so this is a really good one. It's actually, it's very difficult to see through it up there just so you could kind of get a general view of it, but it's got different foods and how long they're good for in your refrigerator and the best quality in the freezer. So as I mentioned, refrigerated leftovers are good for about 3 to 4 days. And then foods in your freezer are actually safe forever. So indefinitely foods are safe in your freezer. So when your freezer is set at 0 degrees and below, bacteria can't grow at that point. You're not going to kill it otherwise, or excuse me, you're not going to kill it also when it's that cold, but you will not have it grow. So food will stay safe in your freezer forever, but there will be some quality loss after a certain portion of time. For most meat and poultry, it's 2 to 6 months. Pizza, luncheon meats, 1 to 2 months. So there was another point. Yes. Oh, another point on that is if you are going to be moving different sorts of foods around, more for, let's say, the summertime especially, and even the packed lunches for kids especially, is to use cold water bottles. So basically to freeze water bottles, freeze different sorts of drinks, and then use those as a de facto ice pack. So doubling that up as, yes, that'll be my drink, that'll defrost, but it'll also help to keep my food cold. Alrighty, next slide, please. Alrighty, so this is our new shiny app. So this is called the Food Keeper app. Basically, this is a collaboration with us at the USDA, FDA, CDC, the Food Marketing Institute, and then also Cornell University. So it's been around now for 2 years, and it's seen quite a bit of innovation updates. So the goal originally in the last administration of this was to prevent food waste, so making sure food is not thrown out before it's actually still safe, and then also to prevent foodborne illness. So it has, excuse me, almost 500 different foods now and beverage items, so it lets you know how long they're good for in your refrigerator, pantry, freezer, if it's applicable. And it now also offers cooking videos for different sorts of meat, poultry, and seafood items, as well as recall notifications through the app. So that's interesting to do. It shows you if you've researched, let's say I had, brand X cereal, and then I searched for brand X cereal, and then brand X cereal had a recall within that time frame. It'll give you a notification when you go in the app, hey, brand X cereal has been recalled if you still have it. You can also sync it to your calendar, so you can add different foods that you've purchased from your grocery store, and then you can say, it'll give you a notification. I'll show you in the next slide what that notification looks like, but I'll tell you, hey, you need to use or freeze this product by this date. It'll give you a little notification on your phone. Alrighty. And we'll go on to the next slide, and I'll show you a little bit more about the different other functionalities. So on the left, you'll notice that that is in Spanish as well. So the app is in Spanish and Portuguese too. And right there, it's showing that you can search for different types of food. So it'll give you different, we're looking at different types of chicken there, cooked chicken, raw chicken, everything like that. And then it'll also, when you get into those food groups, it'll give you great food safety information and just cooking tips as well. So best oven or best method for cooking the whole chicken is the oven, 350 degrees, 20 to 30 minutes pound. And if you scroll down, it'll give you the food safety information as well. Alrighty, and then as I mentioned on the right there, that's a notification that you'll get for those foods that you might have put into your calendar through the app, letting you know that you use those chicken parts or thighs by whatever time or date they will be of best safety and quality. And then another information for you on the Food Keeper app is that if you do not have a smartphone, but you do have a computer, you can find a web-based version of the app on foodsafety.gov. So if you go onto foodsafety.gov, it should be, I believe, on the top banner, or you can search on there for the Food Keeper. So it's basically just a database on that in the web-based version. And then if you do not have a smartphone or you do not have a computer, you can also call our USDA meat and poultry hotline, which I'll get into shortly, for all those sorts of food safety storage information. And then some of our different publications also have the storage dates for usually the meat, poultry, and egg products. So they will have a majority of these items, but not all of them. All right, next slide, please. So, okay. And I guess before we jump into this one, we'll do a quick poll about what types of information would be most beneficial to you in your capacity, whether that's electronic resources, printed materials, infographics, blogs, those sort of items. So we'll let that run for a minute.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be closing the poll soon, and please enter your responses. Great. So it looks like the most popular format for food safety education information that participants said they would benefit from are electronic materials at 36%, followed then by printed publications at 28%. And then we have the remainder: printed infographics, in-person training, then magnets.
Okay, it's great to hear because we actually have all those. So, so basically I will go over the different free consumer resources that we have regarding food safety. And basically all of these, especially the publications, are also available in electronic form. Obviously the PowerPoints are as well, the presentations are too. So, alrighty. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So within our different resources are publications. So these are all printed. So we have a different types, and then in those different general types, so we have general food safety information for different occasions. So we have brochures for what we call Let's Talk Turkey. So there's Thanksgiving information. So those are in brochure format. We also have safe handling of takeout foods. So that's also in brochure format. And then we have more comprehensive documents, and these are more in booklet forms. So the one we call our Food Safety Bible, per se, is the Kitchen Companion. We have a similar one called Cooking for Groups. And then we also have one that's just generally, it's great information to have and good for an emergency kit. It's the Consumer's Guide to Severe Storms and Hurricanes. So you might be living in Iowa, and you're probably never going to see a hurricane in Iowa, but it still has great information on power outages, how to know how long and good your food is if you lose power in your refrigerator, freezer, how to sanitize cans if they get in flood water, how to remove certain smells if you lose power for an extended period of time, those sort of things. So it's a great publication to have as well. And the good thing about basically, I'd say 90% of these publications, they are also available in Spanish too. So if you do have Spanish-speaking individuals that would benefit from these. We do have some information in other languages as well, and it's basically just a hand-washing card, so it's not too diverse, but we do have those as well. Alrighty, so our next general group of publications that we have are the at-risk demographics. So for older adults specifically, we do have one booklet geared just to them. So it's a full-size booklet, so it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet. It's larger print, easier to read, a little bit more picture-oriented, so they can see it, not necessarily need to read the words. And it just explains why older adults are at risk, and then it goes over the 4 steps of food safety in detail. And then we also have ones geared towards people with cancer, people with HIV/AIDS, transplant recipients, pregnant women, and then diabetes as well. So those are all available to order as well. And then if you are interested, there's no age limit on them. We do have information for children, including an activity book, a comic book called Let Me Tell You How Dad Got Sick. So that's always a fun one to have around. Alrighty, and then the other item that some of you guys said you were interested in is infographic posters. So a lot of the information in these booklets and pamphlets was produced in an infographic visual format. So these are 18 by 24 inches, so they are perfect for framing and throwing up on a wall. So they include food safe summary infographics, so explaining why foodborne illness rates increase during the summer, and then ways to prevent foodborne illness, especially when you're cooking outside, those sort of items. Food safe holiday infographics. So this has a lot of information about traveling with food, which is kind of along your guys' lines as well. The Let's Talk Turkey infographic, power outage infographic, and then also an older adults food safety infographic that has a lot of the visuals that we've seen today in them incorporated. And if you are interested, we do have information, a couple items more oriented towards the food service industry. So they're basically just magnets and posters that are, they're the FDA food code serve safe temperatures for those. And we will go through a couple of examples of the different infographics right now. So next slide, please. So hopefully they might be a little bit small for you all to see, but it gives you a general overview of the particular infographics. So up here we've got the food safety during power outages. So a good thing about these is that we can split them up for you. So if you just want, we can't split up the printed ones. Let me rephrase that. We can split up the electronic versions for you. If you do want information, for example, the top portion of the power outage one, if you do just want information on how to prepare for it, actually on that power outage one in the bottom there is information about the sanitizing the cans, making your own household sanitizer. And then also a really good one in general is what foods will need to be disposed of and what foods can be saved if you've lost power in your refrigerator. So that's a really good one to have. As well as the baby boomers and food safety, so the food safety for older adults infographic. So you notice the why you are at risk, that was part of the one slide earlier. So it just kind of gives you what makes you sick, why you're at risk, including product dating, a little bit of general information. So it's basically everything we've talked about today is summarized in this infographic. So once again, those are 18 by 24 inches if you'd like them printed out. And then we do have the electronic versions available as well. So next slide, please. So alrighty, these are examples of our Spanish ones too. We do have, I believe, all the infographics in Spanish. The one on the left is the food safety for people with cancer infographic in Spanish. So it's got a lot of information about what symptoms you might see, different temperatures for different types of foods, foods to avoid, that sort of information. And then the Cocinando para Grupos, cooking for groups on the right there. It's a nice, bright, colorful infographic in Spanish. Alrighty, next slide, please. So this is actually a magnet. It's called our Is It Done Yet magnet. It's our go-to, our mascot is a thermometer, so it's our go-to publication, if you will. So it's just got different types of meats and poultry and fish and the temperature that they are safe to cook to. So that magnet is actually 7 by 5 inches, so it's a half sheet of paper size. So it's great for wherever you were able to stick magnets per se. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so how will you go about ordering these publications? So there's a couple of different ways. The first way you can use is to fill out the publication request form, which is included on the handout section of the webinar here. So it's there. You will also get it in the wrap-up email tomorrow. And then if you also forget about it, but you do have the slide deck, you can reach out to fsis.outreach@fsis.usda.gov. So basically, the publication request form has all the different types of publications that we do have, and they do have most of the links to those, so you can get the electronic forms versions of them through that as well. If you don't see a link to a publication you want, but you do want that in an electronic version, you can reach out to fsis.outreach, or you can reach out to me as well, and we can get those to you as well. So basically, just fill out the publication request form. So we unfortunately cannot ship to PO boxes, but everywhere else in the United States, including, I found this out earlier, the Virgin Islands. So I'm not sure if anybody's here in the Virgin Islands, but you can ship there as well. So if it is also important to add your email address and phone number just in case there is something wrong with the order or something has gone out of stock, which unfortunately we do have some rotating stock. So it's always good to include your contact information. And the next way that you can also order is to call our USDA meat and poultry hotline. So the number to that is 1-888-674-6854. So that's 1-888-MP hotline. And we will get into the meat and poultry hotline next. So next slide, please. So alrighty, the meat and poultry hotline, the USDA's meat and poultry hotline, it's been around for 30 years now. So it's our toll-free hotline available Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as Thanksgiving Day, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you have any last-minute emergencies on Thanksgiving, we are there on Thanksgiving Day if you have any questions. So we do all sorts of topics that you may have interest in, including if there's food storage information. We have quite a few repeat callers, older adults that just have little tidbits of information they like to get from us as well. So we don't mind getting even the simplest questions. It's we consider it a benefit for us and a benefit for you if you are able to reach out to us. So the hotline receives almost 80,000 calls each year. As I mentioned, it's toll-free. It's been around for 30 years. And if you have any questions, you call that number. And then if you do have questions you want to send by email, there is an email address that you can use through AskKaren.gov, and you can also chat with AskKaren.gov live. And the chat hours of the chat are the hours that the hotline is also open, so 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. And another note on these are also both available in Spanish. If you'd like to call with Spanish questions or you'd like to chat with Spanish questions, you can do that as well on both those sites too. Alrighty, next slide, please. So these are some of the other electronic resources basically that we have available. So as I mentioned, the Meat and Poultry Hotline, our Twitter account, it's a relatively fun account, we'll say. So it's got a lot of good information at USDA Food Safety. We do now have a new Pinterest account at USDA Food Safety as well, our Facebook page, foodsafety.gov, and also foodsafety.gov, which is the website that is a collaboration between us at the USDA, the CDC, and the FDA. So all of those resources have all great food safety information. Alrighty, next slide, please. So this is a new presentation and outreach tool that we've been utilizing for the last couple of years here with the USDA's Food Safety Inspection Service. So it's called the Food Safety 101 for older adults. So it's a collaboration that started with the NCOA and us here at the USDA about 2 summers ago. So basically it's a presentation that we provide to the senior centers throughout the country and basically talking about how you can prevent foodborne illness. So it's geared more towards those adults and their caregivers to basically empower them. So like I mentioned, we do have our individuals that are able to present it, but if you are interested in presenting the information on your own, we do have a facilitator guide with a presentation script, and I also do provide train-the-trainer sessions to help anybody get familiar with the presentation material so that they can comfortably do it themselves. Alrighty, next slide. And then if you are interested in information on the presentation, you can contact me directly. So that's my desk phone number, 202-260-9432. And then my email address is simply first name Adam dot last name Gehring, GHERING at fsis.usda.gov. It's a mouthful. All right. Alrighty, final slide. So that's most of my information there. If you have any questions, feel free. I think Magda will go over those now. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I know we're right up against time, and we just have one quick one to slide in. If there have been any studies that show whether hand lotion helps trap bacteria on hands after individuals have finished hand washing, and that's the last question.
Hand lotion, not to the top of my head that I can think of. There is some information on the flip side with hand sanitizers. Hand sanitizers are better than not washing your hand. However, just with hand sanitizers, you don't wash it off. So if there are parasites or, let's say, certain sorts of chemicals on your hands, that hand sanitizer isn't necessarily going to remove that potential illness causing. But the lotions I do not know off the top of my head. So that's a great question. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
That's the last of the questions, right? If we want to finish on time at 4:30. Adam, you presented us with a lot of practical and very relevant information, all these great materials that people can order. I have to tell you, I already downloaded the Foodkeeper app on my iPhone. Thank you very much for doing this. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed the webinar and that you give us some feedback on the evaluation. It will pop up when you log out, and I hope to see you on our next National Research Center on Nutrition and Aging webinar. Bye.